Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, the protests in Iran now at a key turning point as the Islamic regime has brutally killed and attacked protesters, with one Iranian who escaped saying protesters are drowning in blood. Now, those on both sides in Iran are waiting to see if President Donald Trump and the United States military will intervene on behalf of the protesters. We'll bring you our in-depth look from the Middle East. What would happen if the regime in Iran and Cuba were to fall? We are going to hear from one historian who says it could be the biggest event since the end of the Soviet Union. And a simple question at a Senate hearing on the safety of the abortion pill. Can men get pregnant? We're going to bring you a look at the question and the answer. All those stories and more right now on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
It is Thursday, the 15th of January. I want to begin this half hour with the protests in Iran, with some saying, and now they could be at a pivotal moment, with both sides watching and waiting to see if President Donald Trump is going to intervene. Chris Mitchell has our top story now. He's reporting from Jerusalem.
One day after he encouraged Iranians to keep protesting, President Trump said he's been told the killings have stopped.
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place, and we're going to find out.
Iran's foreign minister told Fox News there are no plans for executions, and there's been no protests for several days. Others tell a different story.
But there are some Iranians who have been able to get a hold of friends or family inside. And what they are saying is that the situation is incredibly dire. The amount of casualties is higher than what's even being reported in the media.
Iranian-born activist Golay Gamari tells CBN News the protests have come to a breaking point.
So it really is now or never, because what Iranians are saying is that if we do not overthrow the regime, then every single person who has been slaughtered these last few days, it will all have been in vain.
She says the regime is waging war on its people to survive.
It's war. It's war out there. Iranians are unarmed, and the Islamic regime, the Islamic dictatorship, they've now brought in their proxy forces like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and all of that was funded by the Islamic Republic. So those same terrorist groups are murdering Iranians as well.
Iranian rapper Miraj Tirani managed to escape the country. In tears, he described what he saw and pleaded for help.
تو ایران این چند روز جهنمو دیدم. گناه داریم، خیلی گناه داریم. فقط کمک خارجی چیزا رو غرق میکنن تو سر سینه. شلیک مستقیم بی‌رحمانه دارن میکشن همه رو.
One forensic doctor says the wounds from many of those killed indicate snipers from a high elevation. The internet blackout is now in its 7th day, and some reports indicate the regime may introduce their own domestic internet. Yet some videos like this one on Instagram show crowds shouting death to the dictator. Throughout the region, preparations are underway for a potential confrontation between the U.S. and Iran. Some U.S. personnel have been told to leave the U.S. base in Qatar, and a U.S. carrier strike group is on its way to the Middle East. And here in Israel, the country is preparing for a possible Iranian retaliation if the U.S. attacks. If the regime does fall, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who many see as a transitional leader, said Iran would be a friend to the free world.
In security and foreign policy, Iran's nuclear military program will end. In diplomacy, relations with the United States will be normalized, and our friendship with America and her people will be restored.
In the meantime, the White House announced the launch of Phase 2 of the Gaza peace plan. The plan would establish a temporary technocratic Palestinian administration in Gaza, begin full disarmament of all unauthorized groups, and start reconstruction.
And Chris joins us now with more. So, Chris, do protesters in Iran and their supporters believe this is a turning point in the uprising, that it's now or never? Do they see these protests as the last chance to bring down the regime?
Ephraim, I think they really do. Now or never, do or die, literally. And so many have already given their lives, and they're saying, and they've been saying this almost since the very beginning, is that this is the last battle. And so many protests have failed before. Right now, they have hope. They have hope about President Trump, and they're rallying around one leader, Reza Pahlavi. Iran has been weakened significantly. The proxies have been degraded. There's an economic disaster, water crisis. So there's so many elements that make this protest different than the ones before. And many people feeling, what more can they lose? And as we talked to Goldie Gamari, she was saying people have never been more motivated, and they're not going to stop until they're free. But right now the question is, and the main question, what will President Trump do? And as we heard this Iranian rapper say, really foreign help is what they need right now.
What are the figures you're hearing about the number of dead right now?
Well, you know, we started hearing numbers around 500, then 2,000, then 12,000, then 20,000. And now yesterday I just heard they were up to 30,000. We probably won't know the correct numbers until either the protesters overthrow the regime. I want to read just something I got a couple of minutes ago, Ephraim. It says, this is from Isfahan. It says, the bodies of the massacre victims are being kept in fruit and vegetable refrigerators because hospitals have run out of space. In some cases, family came, identified severely wounded people in the refrigerators. And the shooters, and we referred to this in our report, they're from Afghanistan. They're Arabs, have been brought in by the regime. Heavy machine guns in the streets. And for the funerals, only the mother and father are allowed to attend. So there's just such a really slaughter, massacre that people were hearing reports out of Iran right now.
President Trump seems to be backing off military action, at least for now, but other reports indicate a strike may be coming. What can you tell us?
Ephraim, there are so many mixed messages out there right now. Some people believe that what President Trump shared yesterday in the Oval Office could be trolling, part of psychological warfare. It seems like his message was different from the very day before when he talks to the protesters to keep protesting. Right now, he said on Truth Social that Iranian protesters will no longer be sentenced to death. And he says that's good news. Hopefully, it will continue. On the other hand, we hear an Iranian official is telling Al Jazeera, Trump saying that he does not intend to attack. Times of Israel, we hear the U.S. may strike in the coming days or next several days. So many mixed messages going on right now. Perhaps this is all psychological warfare. We do see that there are military assets bringing into the region, this strike carrier group. So we'll see what happens. It's certainly a time right now, Ephraim, to be praying for the people of Iran and praying for wisdom for President Trump and his advisors to make the decision, a really historic decision. This is really a pivotal hinge of history right now, Ephraim. We're watching to see which way Iran will go.
What are your thoughts? Would Israel be involved if there is a strike on Iran?
Well, it's likely Israel's already involved. We know that in the 12-day war in June, there were Mossad operatives on the ground inside Iran. Likely they're still there. That's been a cat and mouse, spy versus spy game inside Iran for decades, as part of this unseen war. But I think Israel would see this also as a historic opportunity to work with the U.S. To see the end of the regime. But right now, I think Israel's trying to be quiet. They don't want to be seen as involved, and they don't want to give any more propaganda to the Iranian regime that is already blaming Israel for the fomenting these protests.
What more can you tell us about Reza Pahlavi's plans for a new Iran if he does become the leader?
Well, in addition to what we already said in our report, he said he would open up Iran's oil and gas resources. These are some of the largest in the world, that he would confront terrorism. And what a change that would be, since Iran for years, decades, has been the largest state sponsor of terrorism. U.S. relations would change and normalize. He would reach out to Israel and establish what he calls the Cyrus Accords, based on King Cyrus from the Bible and how his good relationship with the Jewish people. It would represent a new chapter in Iran, and they would become part of the free world. It would change the Middle East and the world, and that's, Ephraim, why it's really so important to be praying for the people of Iran, praying for this this important moment in history, which many people are comparing to what the fall of the Berlin Wall and the demise of the former Soviet Union, and that had an impact globally and made history. So important to be praying right now, Ephraim.
Indeed it is. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, thank you so much for your insights. Looking forward to checking back with you come tomorrow. Coming up, why we may be at a turning point in history if the regimes of Iran and Cuba were to fall. We're going to hear from an historian who explains what the potential impact could be. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. We'll be right back. Many are wondering if the regimes of Iran and Cuba are on the verge of collapse. On this week's episode of The Global Lane, historian Jared Knott joins us. He's talking about if these two regimes could come down, it could be the biggest shakeup in the world since the fall of the Soviet Union.
Issues that we're facing here in the United States with our election of a socialist mayor in New York and with what's happening across the globe is which kind of government, which kind of economy is best for the people. And you can look at how socialism has worked out in Cuba. They're in utter collapse, and how well it's worked out in Venezuela. At one point 25 years ago, they were the wealthiest country in all of Latin America, and basically under a free enterprise type system. They turned to socialism. Of course, Cuba for years has been turning to socialism. Both have just been utter, unspeakable disasters. On top of that, we have the situation in Iran. Just a year and a half ago, they were on the verge of having a nuclear weapon. They were a terrorist country spreading terrorism throughout the Middle East and throughout the world. And with the idea of them having a nuclear weapon, a terrorist organization having a nuclear weapon was nightmarish. Now they're in near collapse. Cuba is just economically has collapsed. And of course, Venezuela, we've decapitated it with this narco-terrorist leader. So a lot of progress has been made in the right direction. Have to add quickly, the work is not done. Huge amount of work still in front of the administration, but major strides have been made.
Well, I reported on the collapse of the USSR under Ronald Reagan, and I was also in Berlin and witnessed the collapse of the Berlin Wall. But that was a result of Mikhail Gorbachev's policy of glasnost and perestroika, allowing a greater amount of freedom in his country. In Iran, the Ayatollah and leadership is cracking down, even killing their people right now.
Yeah. Yes, going back to the collapse of the Soviet Union, the only thing keeping the other states there, including Ukraine and the others, the Baltic states, in alignment with the Soviet Union, was there was a gun to the head of the people. You started in Hungary in 1955, and in Poland, whenever the people tried to rise up to break away from the Soviet Union, there'd be a huge military force come in and crack down and kill a lot of people and force them back into compliance. Once Gorbachev, to his great credit, take a more enlightened view, we're not going to put a gun to the head of the people to force them to stay in the Soviet Union. Once that gun was taken away from their head, they were in the streets by the hundreds of thousands demanding independence. And the Soviet Union just collapsed completely, no longer exists. We have Russia, of course, but we don't have a Soviet Union. We have Mr. Putin, who wants very much to put his mark on history by rebuilding the Soviet Union, which I don't think is going to be possible. But that's a whole ugly chapter of history that ended up going the right way. Basically, you can call it the collapse of socialism and proving that once again socialism doesn't work. I go down to, it seems like we have to learn it every generation. You look at Venezuela and Cuba, see that it doesn't work now any more better than it did 30 years ago. A different situation with Iran. The terrorist regimes are failing, and that is very good for the people in the world who want to have freedom, election, free enterprise, prosperity, hospitals, schools, bridges, as opposed to war and terrorist activity.
Well, I think a lot of the parallels may be between Reagan and what he did and Bush, what he did against the Soviets, and today with Trump, sanctions and taking economic measures to strangle them economically. That really seems to be making a difference. But what parallels do you see with other historic events?
Well, the history, because it does not have one continuous flow in one direction. It'll be heading one direction, sometimes take a right turn to the right or turn to the left. You go back to the American Revolution, that was a major turn away from being dominated, one country being dominated by another. That was certainly a major turn in the right direction. I guess you could even count, some people would even count the Alamo and Texas winning its independence, because that opened up manifest destiny. Some people say it was a bad thing, but I think it's a good thing. This idea of sea to shining sea, an American country dominating, stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific, that was you call that a turning point. The defeat of Germany in World War I and certainly in World War II, that was it was something of a close call. That was a major turning point in history. The collapse of the Soviet Union, of course, being another we just mentioned, and then now with the collapse, near collapse of Cuba, and with the decapitation of the narco-terrorists in Venezuela. And it was just a year and a half ago, again, we had a terrorist organization, as I mentioned, close to getting the nuclear weapons. Can you imagine a worse nightmare than terrorists having a nuclear weapon? We were very close to that. Now that's been washed down the drain, and we're going in a completely different direction. That could be considered a major turning point also. And I will point out that usually in history, fortunately, that democracies have a tendency to win over totalitarian interests or totalitarian regimes. That's not always true, but generally speaking, democracy is winning slowly, carefully. Sometimes it's difficult to do, very difficult to do, but democracy seems to be winning and have for these last 250 years.
Okay, so we may be on the verge of something big here. Historian Jared Knott, author of Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, Book 2, The Many Mistakes That Changed the World. Thank you, Jared. We appreciate you being with us.
Also in this week's episode of The Global Lane, not for sale, the United States and Denmark dispute over Greenland. And we've got a look at the progress made in an American religious freedom. Watch tonight on the CBN News Channel at 8 Eastern. You can also watch it on the CBN News app, and it's available on YouTube as well. Still ahead here at home, a Senate hearing takes on the concerns around the abortion pill. And the senator asked this question: can a man get pregnant? We're going to bring you a look at the hearing right after this. A contentious exchange erupted in Congress Wednesday as a medical doctor refused to answer this question: can men get pregnant? The question came during a hearing about the safety of the abortion pill and efforts to limit its distribution. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson is on this story.
The Senate Health Committee heard testimony from an abortion doctor who said mifepristone is safe and effective. Her credibility came into question when she refused to answer Senator Josh Hawley's basic question.
Can men get pregnant? You're a doctor, I think.
Science and evidence should guide medicine.
Do science and evidence tell us that men can get pregnant? Biological men, can they get pregnant?
I also think yes/no questions like this are a political tool.
No, yes/no questions are about the truth, doctor. Let's not make a mockery of this proceeding.
Another physician testified mifepristone can be dangerous, especially to women who get it in the mail.
The different risks that are associated are bleeding, infection, hemorrhage, need for transfusion, and perforation.
Louisiana's Attorney General said the drug's by-mail access circumvents states' abortion bans.
After Dobbs, the Biden FDA promptly announced that it would remove the in-person dispensing requirement for abortion pills, thereby authorizing mifepristone to be shipped nationwide by mail.
Pro-life leaders want the Trump administration to suspend distribution of the drug until its risks can be further studied and to reinstate mandatory in-person doctor visits.
The American people can and should weigh in on this, and they can make their voices heard by texting LIFE to 67742 and signing the petition calling on the FDA to act.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
And stay with us, coming back with an encouraging word for your Thursday. You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I hope you'll join me in this prayer of gratitude. God, thank you for delayed delivery. My impatience did not rush you. You remained God and delivered what I wanted when you saw I was actually able to handle it. Help me to trust your timing more than my own. It is indeed perfect. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News channel. You can find them there at any time as well as online. That address is cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. You can also reach out and touch us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.